Hi guys, and welcome back to Murder and Mysteries with Megan. I just wanted to start out by saying welcome if you are new here, and if you are not new here, thank you for coming back. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so that you're notified every time that I upload a new video. I did want to also make a quick disclaimer that all the cases that I cover are for educational purposes only, and some of them may not be suitable for younger audiences, including this one. So anyways, without further ado, let's get started. First thing I'm going to talk about is Susan Smith. She was the mother of two young boys, Michael and Alexander. She was married to a man named David Smith. So you've got Susan Lee Smith. She was the mother of Alex and Michael. And then you have David Smith, who she was estranged from at the time of the occurrence, who was also the father of the two boys. There were a couple other people involved in this case, so I want to go ahead and tell you about them first before we get started into everything that transpired. So the other people that are briefly involved in this case are Beverly Russell, which is Susan Smith's stepfather, Linda Russell, which is Susan Smith's mother, and then you have Tom Finley. He briefly dated Susan Smith as well, but he always denied that there was anything serious going on between the two of them. So on October 25th of 1994, reports began to arise of two missing little boys. This occurred in Union, South Carolina. The two boys, Michael and Alexander, Michael was actually only 3 years old and Alexander was 14 months old. Susan Smith had claimed that she had been hijacked and her car had been taken by a African-American male with a gun who jumped in her car and said, "Go and drive where I tell you to drive." So that's where this all started out. About 9 days later, finally, after searching for the boys, after having many interviews on the news, things like that, Susan Smith actually admitted to murdering her two young boys and that she was actually guilty of their deaths. So now that we've looked at kind of the summary of the story, let's take a look at the timeline of things to see what led up to this horrific crime, the court case, media interviews, and a little bit of the background on Susan Smith herself. So Susan Smith was born on September 26, 1971 in Union, South Carolina. So she's been living there her whole entire life. She had quite a few mental health issues and suicide attempts in her life. In fact, her first reported attempt of suicide was when she was 13 years old. Susan Smith's health issues actually stem from a poor home environment. Her father, Henry Vaughn, was reportedly an alcoholic who would abuse her and her mother. He would come home, he would accuse her mother, Linda, of being unfaithful to him, and it would lead to an abusive outburst and a physical altercation between the mother and father. And of course, Susan Smith is growing up watching all of this stuff happen. It continued to get worse in her parents' relationship. Her parents, Harry and Linda, decided that it was probably time that they get a divorce. Things weren't getting any better. They continued to stay the same. He was still drinking. Nothing was working between them. So they finally finalized their divorce in 1977. And in January of 1978, Susan's father was very depressed due to the divorce and everything. And he was said to be devastated over losing his family. This actually led to him taking his own life. So Susan at this time was only 6 years of age, and she was really close to her dad. So of course, this really screwed her up as far as, feeling like people were going to abandon her. It led to a lot of issues in her life. The only thing that Susan actually had left from her father was a coin collection and a tape recording of his voice. So this is all she had left of her father, who she was extremely close to. And so, of course, as a 6-year-old little girl, she doesn't quite understand what's going on and why her father isn't there anymore, and that's all she has left of him. So this, of course, had a massive effect on Susan as she was growing up and caused more pain and depression in her childhood. So by the time that she was 13, as I previously mentioned, this was her first attempt of suicide on her own life. Her parents' tumultuous relationship and her father's suicide were unfortunately not the only things that Susan actually had to go through in her young life. After Susan Smith's mother and father got a divorce and her father unfortunately committed suicide, Linda actually started seeing a new man. His name was Beverly Russell. This man was supposed to be, a good person in the community. He was supposed to be, uplifting towards Susan. He was supposed to love her. He was supposed to protect her and be her stepfather. And unfortunately, the exact opposite happened. He actually started molesting Susan Smith. Whenever she was around 15 or 16 years old, she reported the first incident of the molestation. Her first report against her stepfather was to the Department of Social Services, as well as she came out to her mom and said, that he had been molesting her. However, unfortunately, the abuse still continued. Her mother had initially decided, hey, I'm going to go ahead and separate from Beverly and listen to what Susan said. But then, just a little while later, she ended up going back to Beverly, and things never stopped. The abuse continued well into adulthood for Susan by Beverly Russell. So, of course, this on top of everything else that she's gone through has really messed up, her mental stability. So when she was a senior in high school, she again tried to report Beverly for the abuse that he was taking out on her. Unfortunately, when DSS asked her if she wanted to press charges, she wouldn't move forward with the charges. And so, yet again, the abuse continued. Between 1988 and 1989, after she graduated high school, Susan again attempted to take her own life. This was the second time that this happened. This particular attempt was actually due to a relationship that she had not working out with a married man that she was actually having an affair with. In addition to having this affair with a married man, Susan reportedly had 2 other affairs that were going on at this time. One which was still with her stepfather, Beverly Russell. Another relationship that she had was with a younger co-worker of hers from the same store that she and the married man both worked for. So these were all co-workers that she was having an affair with, and her stepfather. Things didn't turn out so well. So she actually had become pregnant during this time, and due to seeing a few different men, there was question about who the father was. She was sleeping with multiple men, but instead of having the child, Susan decided to have an abortion. So a couple years after the affairs that Susan Smith had been having, and she ended up pregnant having the abortion, she meets her husband, David Smith. They get together and they end up getting married March 17th of 1991. Unfortunately, the timing wasn't necessarily the best. Just 11 days before they got married, David's brother had actually passed away due to Crohn's disease. So due to this, David's parents were really struggling and were having a lot of issues themselves. So that following May, after they got married, David's father attempted to take his own life. At the same time, his mother moved away to get away from, I guess, all of the issues. So everything that's happened at this point is kind of the same thing that's been happening in Susan's life up until this point. All of the drama, the mental health issues, and everything else that's happened. In October of that year, in 1991, the two actually welcomed their first son, Michael Daniel Smith. Michael was born on October 15th of 1991. The two of them having issues already, of course, they hoped that this would help their relationship and their marriage. But unfortunately, having a child, adding the extra expenses of having a child, only intensified the issues between the two of them. Unfortunately, Susan was one of these people that she was very materialistic and it didn't matter about money. And David was a little bit more on the stricter side of things. And so, because of their financial struggles, he couldn't give all of those things to Susan, which caused even more issues between the two of them. So, they actually decided to split up after Susan decided to talk to her mother about their marriage, about what was going on. And then Linda decided to put her 2 cents in and say how they should be acting towards one another, how they should be parenting their child. All of these things just culminated and led to the point of them actually separating in March of 1992. David and Susan's marriage was continuing to fall apart, and unfortunately, that's why they decided to separate. They actually were separated for quite a few months during this time, and they were reportedly working on their marriage. However, it came out that Susan was actually seeing a former boyfriend of hers at the time that she was supposed to be working this out with David. Later on, fast forward a couple months, and Susan is actually pregnant with their second child. This was Alexander. When the couple found out that they were going to have another child, of course, this gave them the incentive, like, I want to work on our marriage. Let's try this again. Let's see what happened. Maybe we can make it work this time for our sons. So, of course, they decided they were going to buy a house together and just add more expenses. Great idea. Well, of course, as you can tell, sarcasm from my voice, that wasn't the case. This continued to just make things worse between the two of them, adding another child to the mix, adding another house and having a mortgage, and just everything else that had been going on in the relationship thus far. So Susan continues to become more distant in their relationship, and it actually led to David actually having an affair this time. On August 5th of 1993, Alexander was born. The couple's marriage, unfortunately, only lasted about 3 weeks after he was born. After deciding to call it quits on their marriage, 3 weeks after Alexander was born, it looked like the two were going to go ahead and continue to work together to co-parent the two boys. This is the way that everything seemed to have been going on the outside. However, Susan then decided to leave the job that her and David actually had worked at together. Decided to start working at a company called Conso Products. This is actually where she met Tom Finley. Now, Tom Finley was a very well-known, well-off bachelor in the Union, South Carolina area. Everyone wanted to date him, and he was one of the most eligible bachelors in the area for all the single women. Susan and Tom just started this on-again, off-again relationship that they would have. It seemed, however, that Susan was a little bit more infatuated with Tom. She, of course, desperately wanted things to work out with Tom. In fact, Tom actually had told Susan that he didn't want anything serious, that he was just having fun, that he didn't want anything more between the two of them. He also had stated that, she had a promiscuous nature and that she had children, and that wasn't something that he was interested in having in a relationship. Not even just with her, but just in any relationship. He didn't want kids that were not his to take care of, etc., etc. So it come to find out, Susan actually later admitted that while she was seeing Tom Finley, she was also seeing 3 other men. So Susan revealed that she was actually still continuing to have a relationship sexually with Beverly Russell, on again and off again with David Smith. And she was actually claiming to have a relationship with Tom Finley and his father. So she was having a relationship with her stepfather. She was having a relationship with Tom Finley and Tom Finley's father and her ex-husband. These were the four men that she was seeing at this time. So it was pretty crazy. The people that she was sleeping with this at this time, which in turn that kind of gave the explanation about why Tom Finley had told her that she was promiscuous, and this just wasn't something that he was interested in pursuing a serious relationship with her. Now, out of all of these four men that Susan Smith claimed to be having relations with, the only one that actually denied having relations with Susan was Tom Finley's father. Around 1994, in the month of March, Susan and Tom actually quit seeing one another. Tom stated later in a testimony during the court case that David had told him to stay away from Susan, and he actually avoided her until he found out that Susan and David were getting a divorce and that it was going to be finalized in September of that year. The month later, in October, on October 15th, he actually invited Susan over to a hot tub party at his dad's house. During this party, Tom actually started flirting with another woman. This actually in turn made Susan Smith extremely jealous. And so she started flirting with another man who was married at that same party that Tom had invited her to. This is kind of what led to the demise and the finalization of Tom and Susan's relationship. After all of this transpired, Tom wanted nothing to do with her. The fact that she was going to do this with a married man. So they had multiple conversations about this, back and forth, Susan trying to convince Tom to give it another shot, give her another shot, their relationship. You know, she wasn't ready for things to be over. So, of course, that's what she was doing, was begging him not to end things. At this point, Tom had pretty much had enough, and so he told her he wanted nothing more to do with her and that the relationship was going to be over. So on October 17th, Tom wrote Susan a letter. Susan was reportedly very emotional after getting this letter and was very distraught after reading this. So I actually have a copy of the letter that Tom Finley wrote to Susan. It was actually an email, and I'm going to go ahead and read that over to you guys now. So in the letter that Tom Finley wrote to Susan, it's quite a long letter, so I may actually just point key points out as it scrolls across the screen for you guys. Dear Susan, I hope you don't mind, but I think clearer when I'm typing, so this letter is being written on my computer. This is a difficult letter for me to write because I know how much you think of me, and I want you to know that I am very flattered that you have such a high opinion of me. Susan, I value our friendship very much. You are one of the few people on this earth that I feel that I can tell anything to. You are intelligent, beautiful, sensitive, understanding, and possess many wonderful qualities that I and many other men appreciate. You will, without a doubt, make some man a great wife. But unfortunately, that won't be me. Even though you think we have very much in common, we are vastly different. We have been raised in two totally different environments, and therefore think totally different. That's not to say that I was raised better than you or vice versa. It just means that we come from two different backgrounds. He then goes on to talk about a woman that he dated named Laura. He was talking about the differences in their backgrounds and how much issues that they caused for him and her in their relationship. He then goes on to say, Susan, I could really fall for you. You have so many endearing qualities about you, and I think that you're a terrific person. But, like I told you before, there are some things about you that just aren't suited for me. And yes, I am speaking about your children. I am sure that your kids are good kids, but it really wouldn't matter how good they may be. The fact is, I just don't want children. These feelings may change one day, but I doubt it. With all of the crazy mixed up things that take place in this world today, I just don't have the desire to bring another life into it. And I don't want to be responsible for anyone else's children either. But I'm very thankful that there are people like you who are not as selfish as I am and don't mind bearing the responsibility of children. If everyone thought the way that I do, our species would eventually become extinct. But our differences go far beyond the children issue. We are just two totally different people, and eventually those differences would cause us to break up. Because I know myself so well, I am sure of this. Tom then goes on to say, but don't be discouraged. There's someone out there for you. In fact, it's probably someone that you may not know at this time or that you may know, but you would never expect. Either way, before you settle down with anyone again, there's something you need to do. Susan, because you got pregnant and married at such an early age, you missed out on much of your youth. I mean, one minute you were a kid, and the next minute you were having kids. Because I come from a place where everyone had the desire and the money to go to college, having the responsibility of children at such a young age is beyond my comprehension. Anyway, my advice to you is to wait and be very choosy about your next relationship. I can see this may be difficult for you because you are a bit boy crazy. But as the proverb states, good things come to those who wait. He goes on to say a few other things. And then he addresses what happened over the weekend. Susan, I'm not mad at you about what happened this weekend. Actually, I am very thankful. As I told you, I was starting to let my heart warm up to the idea of us going out as more than just friends. But seeing you kiss another man put things back into perspective. I remembered how I hurt Laura and won't let those things happen again. And therefore I cannot let myself get close to you. We will always be friends, but our relationship will never go beyond that friendship. Everyone is held accountable for their actions, and I would hate for people to perceive you as an unreputable person. If you want to catch a nice guy like me one day, you have to act like a nice girl. And you know, nice girls don't sleep with married men. Besides, I want you to feel good about yourself, and I'm afraid that if you sleep with B. Brown or any other married man, for that matter, you will lose your self-respect. So that's a big portion of what the letter says. He ends the letter by saying, again, you will always have my friendship, and your friendship is one that I will always look upon with sincere affection. Tom.